Welcome to the Voices of Healing podcast. I'm your host, Tina Clark. I'm a shamanic Reiki healer teacher, and this podcast is all about giving you holistic solutions and options for any of your healing challenges out there. So thank you for being here. And today's guest is Brandy Cummings. She's a nutritionist, and she's been on her own healing journey, which we're going to hear in a moment. But welcome to the show, Brandy.
Hey, Tina, so great to be here.
So tell us more about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I first got into the world of nutrition because when I was a teenager, I would have these really severe bouts of chest pain that really impacted my ability to get a full breath. And my mom didn't know what was happening, and she would take me to the ER. They would do a chest x-ray and draw labs. They would prescribe me a bottle of Vicodin, and that was it, and send me on my way. And I was, even at that age, I was like, this cannot be the answer, like what is happening here? And so I connected the dots that like when I ate gluten, this happened. And so, and like this was way before gluten-free was like even a thing. And so that was my very first exposure to really connecting the dots about how what we eat could impact our body. So I continued down that path, studying nutrition, and my practice has kind of pivoted several times along the way. It's like once we go through something and experience something ourselves, then we kind of shine the light, right, for the others that are coming up the mountain right behind us. And so I started out just very basic nutrition. Like I would do farmers market tours and grocery store tours. And it was very what I would consider like application based, like very kind of hands-on application based. And I knew that I wanted a more clinical practice. And so I went back to school to get my master's degree in human nutrition. And during this time is when I was exposed to mold. I ended up getting extremely sick. I had a miscarriage and was able to come through the other side of that. So I focus a lot on people with chronic illness in my practice now. And then again, kind of my next phase of healing and learning in my life is when I really started connecting the dots between the behaviors and patterns and parts of myself that were presenting, leading to behaviors and results that I didn't necessarily want in my life, in my business, in my relationships, in my health, and being able to connect the dots between those behaviors and pretty significant past trauma that I experienced as a child. And so that's when I really dove into the energy side of things and emotional health and trauma and being able to clear all of that out so that I am more in alignment with my goals and the goals of my clients. And so again, just kind of keep pivoting as I continue to learn and have my own lived experiences. And that's where I am now.
That's kind of an interesting symptom to have with the gluten.
Yeah.
Like chest pain. I mean, usually it's stomach issues. And so what made you realize it? Every time you were having gluten, you were having chest pain, or what helped you make the connection?
It was really kind of random. I had a family member who was a bit older than me and really into health. And it was kind of the time where like, it was like there was a lot of gluten-free was just being started to talk about. Like, I feel like kind of the paleo diet was getting popular. It was kind of that era. Podcasting was really popular at the time. And so I had this one family member who was very into health, and she was experimenting with going gluten-free because she had heard about it on some podcast. And so I was just like, oh, I'll try it. And then I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. And then I wasn't eating gluten for a while, and then I ate gluten, and I was just like, oh, I see. I got it. I can feel it now.
That happened to me, back during the whole COVID thing. I started taking zinc, and because they recommended to kind of fight off any viruses. And I started to have a lot of issues like with phlegm in my throat and having a chronic sore throat. And so I just could not figure out what, I would eliminate things and I would try different things. And I was listening to this guy who wasn't even, I mean, I guess he recovered from cancer. So he knows about that, but he knows a lot about supplements too. And I wasn't even listening to him for nutrition,
Mhm.
health reasons. And he said, be careful with zinc because some people are very sensitive to it and it can mess with your sinuses.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my God. And I wasn't even taking that much. So I
Yeah.
stopped it cold turkey and the sore throats went away.
Yeah.
So I was like, now if I take it, I don't really like it for that reason. But like if I do take zinc, it's very, very low amounts, and it's
Yeah.
just, I would have never heard like, and that's why I love like podcasting and I love talking to people because they figure things out, you have to figure it out and try things. And who knew? Has anybody else talked about this out there?
Yeah. I
If
know, I
you've
saw
heard
that a
that,
lot.
if you've heard zinc messes with your sinuses, email me because I had never, he just threw it out there kind of like as a side comment, how like the
Yeah.
universe, I don't even think it had to do with anything he was really talking about. He really talks about like, the world and what's going on in the entire world and what to expect in the future, and he just
Yeah.
threw out this zinc thing.
It was meant for your ears. It was meant for you to hear it.
Yeah, maybe I was the only one who heard it. So the mold exposure, I know that I've interviewed people on the podcast who've had problems with that as well. So how were you able to heal from that? How did you figure out it was mold and how did you heal from it?
Yeah, so I started this new job. I was teaching nutrition in elementary schools in our office building. When I started this new job, all of a sudden I started to get extremely sick. I was super dizzy. I felt very, excuse me, kind of out of body. And I had these big, it was called erythema nodosum on my shins. It's like these big, red, hot, painful nodules all over my shins. I was anxious all the time. I was dizzy all the time. I had to miss work a lot. It got to a point where I couldn't shower myself. I mean, it really flipped my quality of life a complete 180. And nobody could figure it out. For a second, they thought I had MS, and for a second, they thought I had Meniere's disease. And nobody could figure it out. Your labs look normal. All the scans and imaging looks normal. Maybe it's in your head. Maybe you should go to therapy. Like I couldn't get any answers. And then I went to this conference in Austin, which I wasn't even feeling well enough to go to. And in fact, I couldn't even watch the keynote speaker. Like I was feeling so sick. I had to go outside and like find a tree to go take a nap under. I was so sick. But at this conference, I met this practitioner there and I just really resonated with him all the like right away. And he said, I can help you. And I said, okay. I was so desperate at this point. I was at such a low point where I thought either I need to get better or I need to transition off of this planet because I cannot do this anymore. And so he's the one that was able to identify that for me. We got proper testing. My exposure came from the building of that new job. And so I just went all in on like his protocol. So there was a lot of nutrition recommendations. There was a lot of detoxification recommendations, and it worked. Like all of a sudden, I was dropping weight really quickly. It was like I re-entered my body, and I felt alive again. I didn't feel like a host for like microbes and other parasites. I just felt like a host before, like I wasn't really living. And it was just like the lights got turned back on. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is working. And then I got pregnant again and then started and carried that pregnancy to term and gave birth and started nursing. And so I've just been kind of in mom mode ever since then. Sometimes I feel like there's still more work to do. Like I feel like I didn't quite get through all of it, but I stopped because I was having babies and nursing. And so just recently, actually, my youngest is 2 now. I've been thinking a lot about like just revisiting that, doing some new testing, checking in, seeing where I'm at, and finishing up maybe what wasn't completed.
So this practitioner, could he tell right away it was mold exposure?
Yeah, he was pretty sure. And then we did the testing to confirm. And he had his own mold exposure journey. He actually had to drop out of grad school because he also got so sick, like he just couldn't function. Not everybody is that extreme, and there's several different reasons for that. But so perhaps it was some bias on his part because he had that lived experience well, but he was right.
Yeah. So what are some of the symptoms of mold exposure?
They vary greatly, but you can have, similar to me, you can have pain, you can have vertigo, you can also have like ice pick type of headaches, you can have interferences with your vision. There's a test that you can take online. It's called the VCS test, the visual contrast screening. It's not diagnostic, but people who have issues with mold will very commonly fail that test. You can have digestive issues, rapid weight gain, or resistant weight loss. And then it's like as things, the longer you go, and the more the more if you're continuing to be exposed, the symptoms can just kind of keep piling on and spiraling. And so a lot of people will have issues with histamine. They'll break out in hives on their skin. They'll have different rashes. So it's very broad, but I think the commonalities that I see in practice are, it's the people who are like, I've tried everything and
Mhm.
I haven't figured it out. And so oftentimes I think of something like mold or reactivated viruses, Lyme, co-infections, parasites, things like that. And then I also think about considering what is the emotional component underneath all of this. Is there past trauma that's happened, or several little small emotional concussions, I like to refer to them, that have happened throughout one's life, that's contributing to just this overall lack of resilience in the body?
That's interesting. I do know someone who had mold exposure. She ended up in the hospital,
Yeah.
and very sick, but they figured it out, and she ended up like losing a ton of weight while she was in the hospital.
Mm.
But good. It's good to know about the VCS test. Just
Yeah,
in
and
case.
it's a free test. You can.
Oh,
So, I mean, it's like it's not diagnostic, but it's like it is a tool, and I've never met somebody that was struggling with mold who passed the test.
hmm. So was this anybody at your job that was also sick?
No. Um, so, and I think that that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's different people are more genetically susceptible, and so there's different HLA haplotypes that people can have, which I do have. I also have other genetic components that make it harder for me to detox efficiently and methylate, and so from that regard, things were kind of stacked against me. And then the other thing that I think is happening, which I didn't connect the dots until years later, but if you look at like Dr. Reichhammer's work, who, thinking about like German new medicine principles and kind of the healing process in the body, he talks about how if we have a significant emotional event. It can cause a dis-ease state in the body. And then once that conflict is resolved, we can enter into more of a healing state, more of a parasympathetic state. But then what's really common is that people will spike a healing crisis before fully resolving and going back to a state of health and homeostasis. And so we see this a lot. Like people will spike a fever, or there will be something that happens after they have resolved something that was very stressful in their life. So for me, I was working at this extremely stressful job. I was in fight or flight all the time. And then when I got that new job, now the conflict has been resolved, right? I'm no longer in that stressful situation. Things are going well. So I think part of why I was so susceptible more than my other coworkers, thinking about that model, I think part of it, that was my healing crisis that I spiked. And then because of genetics or whatever, it hit me really hard, maybe harder than others.
Well, that goes to prove that everything is connected.
Right.
So you were able to leave that previous job, but you were still dealing with the stress of the previous job when you walked into the new job. And so talk more about now you're doing energy work, about the connection between, like what you mentioned, a significant emotional event and our health.
Yeah, so when the body experiences either, some people refer to it as like a capital T trauma, something very significant and big, or like I said earlier, several little emotional concussions over time. I'm sure you've heard of like the book, The Body Keeps the Score, right? Like there's a blueprint, there's an imprint that can be left on the body after something like that happens. And it's not so much about what happened, it's more about the effects that it left on the body. And so how this can show up in our health, the body is so amazing and so intuitive and so much smarter than perhaps we will ever be. But oftentimes, again, this is thinking more along the lines of like German new medicine principles, but oftentimes different symptoms can be connected and correlated with different types of emotional distress or significant emotional events in the past. So, for example, a lot of times people with a lot of skin issues can be connected to some type of separation conflict or feelings of abandonment. A lot of times people with thyroid issues have a shared experience of having situations where they weren't able to speak up, they weren't able to speak their truth, they weren't able to share what was really on their mind. Thinking more about stomach and digestive issues. Oftentimes, this can be connected to people being forced to digest something that they didn't want to. Maybe they witnessed something that they didn't want to, and also anger. Cardiovascular, oftentimes there's unresolved anger there. Obviously, these are not absolutes, and there can be reasons for these symptoms that are just on the physical plane, so to speak. But I think it's important to consider what is the emotional baggage, let's say, for lack of a better word, that this person has that could be contributing to these symptoms. And so when I started diving into this work, I feel like it was such a game changer, because a lot of people in the functional medicine industry, like myself, are heavily focused on things in the physical plane. Here's the testing, here's the supplements, here's the nutrition guidelines, like journal at night, here's the breath work, the lifestyle recommendations, whatever it is. All of that stuff is great and helpful. But oftentimes, if there is significant emotional events, unresolved negative emotions, limiting beliefs that people are holding on to about their health or about life in general, those clients, they'll do all of these protocols on the physical plane. Maybe they'll get a little bit better, but oftentimes they will go back to where they were and they'll keep looping. And then these are people who will jump from practitioner to practitioner to practitioner. These are the people who are like, I've tried everything, nothing's working. And when I dive in with these people, I start talking about this emotional piece, and oftentimes they're like, nobody's ever asked me that. I just had a new client yesterday, and she was like, we got through our initial session, which is like 90 minutes. And I was like, so tell me how you're feeling. What questions do you have? Comments? She was like, wow, nobody's ever asked me that. Nobody's ever connected the dots like that. She came to me for acne on her face. And we spent most of the time talking about what she had gone through with her ex-fiance. And she was like, wow, like that's not what I was expecting, but it makes so much sense. So
That's what I do too, because when you have a physical symptom come up, I always ask my client what was happening at the time. Were
right,
you going through any stress? What was your emotional state or mental state at the time?
right.
And so many people don't think about this, and we need to start thinking about this because nothing is random and everything's connected.
That's right.
So, some people have a hard time answering that question because they're not used to thinking in that way. They don't
Yeah.
reflect that way. But then if you do enough digging, they'll say, well, my parents got divorced around that time.
Yeah.
Or around that time, I went to school that I really hated and I didn't like the kids. Something happened,
Yeah.
around that time. And then you're talking about like skin issues being separation, abandonment. I look at, because I'm a Reiki master, I look at the chakras and their meaning of the chakras. And I
Yeah.
can always tell, if you're having a throat issue with the throat chakra, that has to do with what you just said, speaking your truth,
Yeah.
asking for what you want. That was a big thing for me because I never asked for what I wanted.
Yeah.
And then that energy gets stuck in the throat.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's a like kind of digging, investigative work, energy, investigative work. I ask a lot of questions and I tell my clients, I know I'm asking you a lot of questions, but I really want to know what's going on with you because we probably have, we have limited time together.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So modern German medicine is looking at these things.
Yeah. It's called German New Medicine. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And it's the work of Dr. Reich Hammer. And it's really fascinating because, I just gave a few examples, but there's hundreds of examples of like linking emotional components to different physical symptoms in the body. And it doesn't always apply. I don't like to ever really think in absolutes, but it's so helpful to connect these dots and to really get to a place where we can clear that out, resolve those negative emotions, and, install new programming that is in alignment with what it is with your goals and where you're headed and where you want to go. And people get so much faster, better results when we have that component in place versus just like trying a new supplement, doing another test, or cutting out yet another food or whatever it is.
And, in your opinion, why does the body do this? Because I feel the body just stores everything, almost like a memory,
Mhm.
but it's a physical one. And even though you may have forgotten about it, or you don't even remember, the body remembers. And so what is the purpose of that?
So the subconscious mind can store memories temporally, which is in relationship to time, and it can also store memories atemporally, not in relationship to time. And so kind of like a holograph. And so from my perspective, the body hangs on to these things. So let's say there was a negative event that happened, and then there was negative emotions attached to that event. Maybe it was fear, sadness, hurt, shame, guilt, anger. And if those emotions are not resolved, if we don't get the learnings from it, if we don't get the wisdom, the opportunity for growth so that we can transmute and transform and alchemize this situation and harvest the gold out of it, then the body stores that, and the body will send us messages so that we can get the learning, so that we can resolve these negative emotions. And I think that is, the highest prime directive of the unconscious mind is to preserve the body. So everything that it does is to preserve the body. And this is why sometimes, like you said, like people don't have memories of things that have happened. People can have blacked out memories. The body's trying to protect you. But it will come out in other ways because the body's trying to send a signal. I think about this a lot with like hormones. Like a lot of people come to me and they're like, it's my hormones. I need to balance my hormones. And it's like hormones are just messengers. That's all. The hormone imbalance is not the root cause of what's happening. It's a messenger. It's giving you a message. Same thing I feel like with chronic pain. It's a message. There's a process we can walk through with people where their pain at the beginning of our session can be like a 7 or an 8, and at the end it's a 0, because we're actually allowing them to feel and name their emotions instead of repressing them. And when we listen to the message, the symptom will resolve, or the pain goes away, or whatever it is. And so from my perspective, the connection between emotional events and physical symptoms is the body sending us messages that there are things that need resolved, or lessons to be learned, wisdom to be had, opportunities for growth.
Yeah, because it can be quite confusing, when your body is like doing this, having chronic pain or whatever the issue is, and you just can't figure out how to resolve it.
Yeah.
And what's it connected to? And it could be quite surprising, the emotions that it's connected to.
Totally. And it could also be from things that didn't even happen in your lifetime, that you consciously don't have any memory of, that were passed down epigenetically through the DNA.
Yeah. So are you familiar with that book, It Didn't Start With You?
Yes.
I love that book.
Yes. Totally.
So basically, I can't remember the author, but the book talks about your greatest fears and where they may come from. And they most likely come from, especially fears that you don't understand why you have them, they come from your ancestors. So it makes you look at your parents and your grandparents. And that's all we really know, really. We can't really go back that far, unfortunately, because we don't know that much further back. But when I did the lessons in the book, I realized what my greatest fear was, and I could connect it to a bunch of my ancestors and what they went through.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's really amazing that we're getting to the point now that we're realizing this, right?
Yep.
Despite the denial and pushback.
There's always those, right? We love them for their gifts too,
Yeah. There's a new world coming. And so there's new ways of approaching health and wellness now.
I agree.
And we need it desperately. Like, we need a desperate change. Like, it can't come faster, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think the year of 2027 is going to be a year that there's a lot of rapid change that happens, and I'm excited for what the future holds and the potential of it.
Why 2027?
Just from more of an astrological perspective, I just feel like, yeah, we're just like, this is such an amazing time to be ramping up, really focusing on your health, diving in, really looking at your yourself, your past experiences, doing the work, clearing things out so that like in 2027 and obviously I'm not a, not a fortune teller, but I just feel like this is such an amazing energetic time to be just doing it what you can to be in alignment and loving yourself and supporting your body and living out your purpose and doing the things that you love. And when you're kind of on that trajectory, from my perspective, I think over the next couple of years, it's just going to like get amplified and even better than we could imagine.
So you're saying hang in there.
Yeah, and get excited. There's a lot of fear about the future, right? With AI, with politics, there's a lot of fear about the future, and I can really empathize with that. And just suppose the next couple of years are going to be better than we could have ever imagined. That's the universe I like to live in.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
And the universe always never lets you down,
Right.
Like I've been doing Reiki for 11 years and I still get surprised.
Yeah.
It's like, really? Okay. That was something new. And that's why I love doing Reiki. So what kind of energy work are you doing or trained in?
So my training is more in NLP, hypnosis, quantum time technique, where we can go back on our timeline forward and backwards and clear things out, get the lessons and the learnings and the wisdom from different past events, past life regression, inner child work, kind of that realm of modalities.
Yeah. And I want to mention, you said sometimes things happen to you that are affecting you now, from your ancestors, but I take it even farther. I mean, knowing that we have many lifetimes that we've lived, sometimes those bleed over into this one.
Right.
And when you find out what happened, the symptoms go away.
That's right. It's amazing. The body is amazing.
So yes, it's magic. It's magical when that happens.
Totally.
So, Brandy, do you have any final words, anything that we should take away from this conversation for our listeners?
I work with a lot of people who are chronically ill in my practice and who have been dealing with a lot of symptoms for a long time. They've probably invested thousands of dollars. They've worked with several practitioners. And when you're down that path for so long, feelings of hopelessness can really come into play. And so kind of my parting words that I like to leave with people is a message of hope, and to remember that just because you haven't found answers doesn't mean that there are not answers, and to hold the intention that, what if this mess that you're in becomes your message? What if this becomes your greatest gift? What if this thing that's happening to you is actually happening for you? And just suppose it was. And what would that look like? And coming out of the other side, how would that feel? And what would that allow you to do? And would you write a book, or would you go talk about it? And just to continue to hold the intention and think about what good is coming from this and the answers that are on their way to you. Because I know it's hard when you're in the thick of it to think about that. So just a reminder and a message of hope.
Yeah, I love that. And keep an open mind. I think being open, because you never know where the answer is going to come from.
That's right.
Never know when that aha moment comes from, just like with my zinc story.
That's right.
And I was like, wait a minute, that could be it.
Yep. And it was.
It was. Problem resolved.
Yep.
So, Brandy, can you share what your website is and how people can contact you? And if you have any projects or classes or anything going on, share that too.
Amazing. So my website is resilientmotherhood.health. That is also my Instagram handle, resilientmotherhood.health. We always have different classes and workshops in the works. And so depending on when this will air, my recommendation is just to check our Instagram or the website to make sure you have the up-to-date list.
Okay, well, thank you, Brandy. It was so fun talking to you.
Likewise.
Yeah, it's like you get it. I enjoy that because, like minds, like hearts.
100%. Thank you so much for having me, Tina.
You're welcome. Thanks for being on.